A powerful billionaire walked into a luxurious restaurant, just wanting to eat a steak to forget the long, tiring day. But he didn't expect that a small piece of paper from a black waitress would make him stand still, changing his whole life. Have you ever wondered, what would happen if an ordinary person with just a small act could awaken the conscience of the person who holds the whole world in his hands? Do you believe that just a trembling piece of paper with a few lines of words can spark change in an entire unjust system? This story isn't about money or power. It's about courage in the midst of fear, about justice in places where there seems to be no place for it, amid the smoke of meat, knives and forks, and the pale yellow light of an ordinary evening. A man who seemed to have forgotten his heart, a girl who seemed too young to be heard. But that night, in the kitchen of Magnolia House, two fates collided, and neither was ever the same. Would you dare speak the truth, knowing it could cost you everything? And if you are powerful, do you have the courage to hear the truth? Please like and share before reading the story below, because sometimes you can change the world with just a few words. Charleston, South Carolina. It rained that night. Not much, just enough to make the pavement glisten under the yellow lights like a fresh coat of oil paint. In the middle of the old town stood Magnolia House, an upscale restaurant housed in an old whitewashed mansion with round columns and curved balconies in the style of old Southern architecture. The clear glass reflected the bright sign, the embossed metal letters proud of themselves. Inside, glasses clinked, laughter was hushed, and classic jazz played from speakers hidden behind curtains. The air was expensive, smelling of melted butter and red wine and oak. Everything was designed to make one feel special, if one could afford to sit there. The wooden door opened. A black man walked in. Casual navy jacket, dark jeans, scuffed sneakers, no expensive watch, no tie. He was calm, his eyes scanning the room, slow as someone entering a place he had heard a lot about but never believed. The receptionist was a white woman of about 25, with low-tied blonde hair and a thin smile as if practiced in front of a mirror. She glanced from head to toe, stopping at his shoes, then spoke politely. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, I'm alone." "Oh, it's pretty crowded today. If you don't mind, I could get you a table near the kitchen door." He nodded. "Anywhere." The answer surprised her. At Magnolia House, wealthy guests usually sat in the middle of the room where the light shone directly on the wine glass, so everyone could see them. But this man was different. He followed her, not looking around, not looking strange. She led him past tables full of guests, men in suits, women in pearls, voices interspersed with the words portfolio, country club, golf course. Among all those faces, not a single black person. Not because Charleston didn't have black people, but because the place had somehow never welcomed them as guests. His desk was in the far corner, right next to the swinging door that led to the kitchen. Every time the door swung open, steam and dishwater mixed with butter fumes, creating a mixture of luxury and weariness. No candles, no extra linen, just a cold white light overhead. The man sat down. He put his old phone on the table. No one recognized him. No one knew that, just a few hours ago, he had signed off on an investment that would have bought the entire street. His name was Elias Carter, but tonight, no one needed to know that. 10 minutes passed. No one came. A passing waiter glanced at him, then pretended not to see. 12 minutes later, someone finally came. The girl, Maya Johnson, was petite, with brown skin and curly hair tied back. Her black uniform was faded at the cuffs, and her apron had dried flour stains. She smiled slightly, a genuine smile. "Sorry, sir. It's a bit crowded tonight. I'm Maya. I'll serve you tonight. What would you like to drink first? Water? With ice? Yes, sir." Her voice was a little hoarse, like someone who has talked too much in a noisy place. As she turned away, the light reflected off her worn-out shoes. He noticed that. Maya returned with a glass of water and placed it gently on the table. "What would you like to have for dinner?" Elias opened the menu. His voice was low, steady, and slow. "I would like a 48-ounce tomahawk prime, medium grilled, and a glass of 2007 Cabernet Sauvignon, if you have any left in the cellar." Maya paused. It was the most expensive dish at Magnolia House, over $700 with tax and tip. Let me check the wine." No rush. She nodded and walked away. Elias looked around. No one was paying attention to him. The manager, Harold Pierce, was standing at the bar, shaking hands with customers, laughing. From Elias's position, he could see his face reflected in the full-length mirror. The smile faded like fresh paint. At the table, near the window, a white couple ordered. The waiter came immediately. At his table, there was only a glass of water sweating on the table. When Maya turned back, there was something strange in her eyes, like someone who was thinking too much. She put the menu back, cleared the unused bread plate, and as her hand lightly touched the edge of the table, a white napkin was placed on the table, folded so neatly that anyone who didn't notice would have mistaken it for a regular dish towel. She didn't look at him. "Take your time. It will take about 20 minutes." Elias nodded. She walked quickly toward the kitchen. He waited until she disappeared behind the swinging door before touching the handkerchief. The cotton was soft and slightly damp. He opened it. Inside was a scrawled note in blue ballpoint pen. "Don't eat. They just contaminated your food. It's not safe here. If you can, ask to see the kitchen camera." Elias sat still. His glass of water was cold, but his throat was dry. No one at the table noticed. He remained calm, but his eyes had changed color, not with anger, but with the cold clarity of someone who had seen this before. He put the napkin back in his hand and folded it carefully, as if it were an important document and not a napkin. Then he looked up and saw through the kitchen window the flickering flames, the passing shadows, the clanking of pans. From afar, he saw Maya's shadow, taking the tray. She didn't look back, but he knew she was scared. Elias took a deep breath. Part of him wanted to stand up, go into the kitchen, and scream. Another part felt colder. "If I scream, they'll wipe away all traces. They'll make me look like a suspicious guest. I don't need to be angry. I need proof." He looked around. A couple had just ordered more wine, and laughter was spreading. Unknown to anyone at the far end of the table, a small piece of paper was unleashing a storm. Outside, the rain was fading. The wind still carried the salty smell of the harbor. Charleston was quiet, but Elias's mind was stirred by an old memory, the memory of a boy who had been thrown out of a diner because of the color of his skin. More than 30 years later, the boy returned, and they still didn't recognize him. He looked at the paper one last time. The handwriting was hurried and shaky. She might have been writing with a frightened hand, but there was courage in each word. He said softly, as if to himself, "Thank you, Maya." Then he put the handkerchief in his coat pocket. His eyes turned toward the kitchen, quiet but bright. The night at Magnolia House isn't over. It's just beginning. Elias is not the type of man who catches people's attention at first sight. He is not tall like an athlete. His shoulders are moderately broad. His gait is straight, but not ostentatious. What makes people look back is his eyes, the eyes of someone who has been deprived, underestimated, looked at with half an eye, and chosen not to forget it. He was born in North Charleston, in a wooden house next to the railroad tracks where freight trains rattled the windows at night. His house was at the end of the row, with an old swing on the porch. His mother, Lorraine, worked the night shift at a hotel, cleaning rooms for tourists. His father worked as a porter, coming home late on big ship days. The smell of sweat and salt mixed together. It was not a pleasant childhood, but it was not a tragic one either. It was just the kind of childhood that so many Southern black families had more work, less pay. As a child, Elias liked to wait for his mother at the back door of the hotel. She would leave him there for an hour, telling him not to wander around. He would peek through the crack in the door and see the hotel restaurant inside, white tablecloths, scented candles, shiny cutlery. He remembered the smell of what they called fine dining. But when he asked his mother, "Can I eat in there later?" his mother smiled, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "If you want to eat there, you have to own this hotel first, son." She was joking, but little Elias kept that sentence for a long time. At 15, he applied to work as a kitchen assistant at a seafood restaurant. His job was to pick vegetables, wash shrimp, and wipe tables. He saw many things. He saw white customers order late but still get a smile. He saw black customers wearing church clothes coming in to eat and being asked first, "Are you paying by cash or card?" He saw the chefs joking around in a disrespectful way. One time, they dropped a piece of fish, picked it up, rinsed it with cold water, and threw it into the pan. Young Elias said at that time, "But that's for guests." The chef, at that time, a white guy with a skull tattoo, frowned. "Who do you think you are? You're just a dishwasher." It was the same thing he had heard tonight in Maya's eyes. 20, 30 years had passed, but the tone had not changed. It had only shifted from place to place. At 17, Elias was loaned an old computer by a church pastor. He learned to code. He was smart in a practical way, learning to escape poverty. Not to be praised, he got a scholarship, went to school in Washington, and then worked at a software company. That's when he realized outside Charleston, people still judge by color, but they pay more. Sometimes that's all it takes to stay. Elias started a small payments startup. A few years later, the company was acquired. He had his first money. Instead of buying a sports car, he sent his mother to a place with better health insurance and bought her a small, quiet house. Then he started Carter and Bay Holdings, a fund that invests in areas that are underserved by black people, clean energy, fintech, and luxury hospitality. He told his partners black people also have the right to walk into a nice restaurant without being put at a table next to the kitchen. That's easy to say. But when the foundation bought restaurants in the South, he knew what he was up against: old thinking, old models. Managers who said, "I've been doing this for 20 years. What's the problem?" Magnolia House was one of those places. It was beautiful. It was popular with tourists. It was profitable. But it was old. It carried a history that was unpleasant to black people. 2 weeks before that rainy night, Elias received an email. Not a public email, but an anonymous one that bypassed the system. It stated, "Magnolia House Restaurant has been discriminating based on race." Black customers are often assigned tables poorly and served late. Some kitchen staff are disrespectful to black customers' food. Management knows but does nothing about it. He read it, didn't forward it to PR, didn't forward it to HR, didn't call legal. He just stared at the letter for a long time. Old stories came flooding back. The 15-year-old boy at the seafood kitchen. The freshman who walked into the restaurant and was looked at from head to toe. The way his mother had to smile thinly when a white customer accused her of not cleaning the room. If he called someone else to check, he wouldn't see the real face. If he told them, they would act. So he went himself. He chose to wear a casual coat, go alone, not let anyone open the door, not give his name, not look at the camera. That was how he usually did when he wanted to check any facility in the system. He said to his personal assistant, "Don't call tonight." Assistant asked, "Do you need security?" "No, I just went out to dinner." But in his mind he knew clearly this would not stop at dinner. Sitting at the kitchen table, reading Maya's writing, Elias felt two conflicting emotions. On one side was a very instinctive anger. How many years has it been like this? On the other side was the coldness of someone who had run a multi-million-dollar business. If you want to deal with them, you need proof. He thought of the camera system he had approved for Magnolia House. He remembered that the contract said all the footage would be backed up to the parent company's cloud every 15 minutes. He knew that even if Harold deleted it locally, a copy would still be in New York. He just needed to hold his nerve for a few more dozen minutes. Meanwhile, he thought of Maya. She had no idea who he was. She wasn't sure he would believe her. And yet she wrote. It was something he treasured. When he was young, he had hoped someone in the kitchen would dare to say, "Don't eat that." No one had. Everyone was afraid of losing their jobs. Maya was different. In that moment, Elias saw more clearly why he had started investing in this field. Was it for the money? Yes. Hospitality in the South was profitable, but more deeply, he wanted black kids who walked by a nice restaurant to not have to wonder, is that place for me, and mothers who worked as housekeepers like his mother, if they ever got the chance to eat there one day, not to be assigned a seat by the kitchen door. He looked up at the main dining room. There, Harold was laughing and talking with his guests. There, the young white waiters were pouring wine. There, one would think, everything was perfect. Only at his table the napkin was a warning beneath the perfection there was something dirty. Elias put his hand to the pocket of his coat where he kept the paper. Professional habit made him start formulating a scenario in his head. Step 1, ask to see the manager. Step 2, ask to see the camera. Step 3, if the camera was cut, prove the intentional deletion. Step 4, call security to retrieve the copy. Step 5, protect the witness, the waitress. Step 6, temporary closure, press conference, restructuring. He sketched out each step very quickly, as if drawing on a whiteboard. But in his heart there was still a very human sigh. Why do we still have to do this? Why don't the places he invests in understand that treating black customers fairly is not political? It's just polite. He looked at the clock on the wall. The food might be ready. He didn't know what the chef was doing in the kitchen, but he knew that if he ate tonight, he would be very angry with himself tomorrow, so he wouldn't eat, and he wouldn't let this go. At that moment, Elias suddenly thought of his mother. Lorraine was now retired. She had called him once and said, "You are successful. That is good. But remember, don't let your children think that the world is no longer discriminatory. It is just more skillful." He smiled slightly. She was right. Elias stood up. He pulled his chair closer to the table, adjusted his jacket, quietly, without attracting attention. He walked toward the bar where Harold was standing. "Excuse me, I want to talk to you privately." His voice was normal, but inside, a storm was brewing. The evening shift at Magnolia House always ran longer than the clock. When the first customers sat down at 5:30, the staff had been standing since 3. Maya always arrived earlier. She was used to changing in the small bleach-smelling break room, tying her hair, tying her black apron. She knew every scratch on the wooden table where the light bulb had shorted, and the swing door always creaked. To others, those sounds were noise. To her, they were the rhythm of work. Maya was 26. She had thought she would be a senior in law school by that age, preparing for an internship in Washington, but life took a turn. When her mother, Ruth, was diagnosed with cancer, health insurance would only cover part of it. Tuition couldn't wait. Maya withdrew from school and returned to Charleston. She thought it would only be a temporary job for a year. Then her mother got sicker. The cost of medication increased, and time passed. Temporarily became forever. During the day, she took her mother to radiation therapy, and in the afternoon she went to work. She did not complain, but every night, her legs hurt so much that she just wanted to soak them in salt water and close her eyes to sleep. One day, her mother asked, "Are you sad?" "Maya." She smiled. "As long as I am cured, that's fine. There's nothing to be sad about." That smile became a habit, even at the restaurant. At Magnolia House, Maya was the only black person on the dinner shift. She'd noticed that from the first week. The shifts with high tips tended to go to white servers. They got nice tables, regulars, and pleasant smiles. She, on the other hand, mostly got tables near the kitchen or tables for walk-ins who hadn't been booked. Harold, the manager, had said bluntly, "Maya, I'll leave this table to you. They're from out of town." The out-of-town part was soft, but she understood. It meant not the kind of people we need to brag about. Maya was used to it. She worked hard and didn't complain. She knew that if she wanted to keep her seat, she had to be quiet. But every time she heard her co-workers joking sarcastically, it still hurt her. That table is full of black people. The tip is probably worth a cup of coffee. Let them wait a bit, so they don't have to clear up early. She didn't react. People who react usually don't stay around long. That evening, when Maya saw the black man sitting alone at a table near the kitchen, she had a different feeling. He didn't look around, didn't seem uncomfortable being placed there. The way he sat upright still made her think he was used to being judged. She wondered if he was there out of curiosity or defiance. Then she saw the order, 48-ounce Tomahawk Prime with 2007 Cabernet. A dish the entire restaurant served only a few times a month. She knew the rule unfamiliar customers had to take their cards first, especially when spending nearly $700. But doing it to this man, she felt wrong. She didn't know why. She just knew it was obvious. She typed the command into the computer. The system flashed a message saying manager approval needed. She took a deep breath and pressed override. She knew in her head that if the customer left, the money would be deducted from her monthly tips, but she still did it. When she brought the order into the kitchen, Chef Coleman looked at the screen and raised his eyebrows. "Who is table 17? Walk-in customer. Black? Yes. Tomahawk? Yes." He laughed. The laugh was not loud but heavy. "Has anyone verified the card? I'll override." The whole kitchen was silent for a moment. The sous chef turned back and whistled softly. Coleman continued, "Are you sure, Maya? If it's lost, the whole shift's tip will be deducted." "I don't know." She turned away. She didn't want to look any further. But Coleman's voice continued, "Just a fancy meal for the sake of it. Okay, let's see if he can afford it." Maya pursed her lips. She turned in time to see him sprinkle seasoning on the large piece of meat, then spit quickly, softly, almost playfully. The sous chef laughed. She stood there dumbfounded. It felt like someone had thrown cold water on her. Her heart was pounding. Her face was hot. She couldn't believe she had just seen it. But she had, and she knew if she told anyone, no one would defend her. Harold would say, "Don't make a fuss." Coleman was the head chef, famous, with many connections, and she was just a temporary waitress. Her mother was sick. She needed money. Maya's mind started spinning. If I keep quiet, I still get paid. If I talk, I lose my job. But what if he eats that? If they do that because he's black, then what's the difference between me and them if I keep quiet? She looked through the crack in the door and saw the man still sitting there, reading the menu. She didn't know who he was, but she knew he didn't deserve such humiliation. She took out a new napkin and a ballpoint pen from her apron pocket. Her hand shook. She wrote quickly, "Don't eat it. They just contaminated your food. It's not safe here. If you can, ask to see the kitchen camera." She folded it, stuffed it in her pocket, and brought out the food. When she put the food down, she placed the towel beside the glass of water and said softly, "Please, take your time." She didn't look at him, just hoping he understood. Back in the kitchen, she felt her heart still pounding. Coleman asked, "Is it ready?" "Yes." "Good. Let's see how he reacts." Maya turned away, afraid that her eyes would reveal something. She took another tray and continued serving the next table. But her mind was in turmoil. She was afraid. Afraid that the customer would misunderstand. Afraid that she would be discovered. Afraid that Harold would know what she had written. In this restaurant, every little thing could be an excuse. 10 minutes later, she glanced back at his table. He wasn't eating. He was sitting, his hands clasped in front of his chest. The white light reflected off his face, calm and cold. She saw him pick up his glass, take a sip, then put it down, his eyes on the bar where Harold was standing. She knew it was about to begin. Inside, everything was a jumble: fear, relief, and a strange confidence, whatever the outcome. At least she hadn't kept quiet. The shift continued, knives and forks clinking, customers still smiling. No one knew what was going on in the kitchen. No one knew the little waitress had just written a note that would change the whole restaurant. When Harold called her name, his voice was still sweet. "Maya, there is a guest who wants to see you later." She looked, her heart beating faster. "Who is it?" "Table 17. She swallowed. There was no turning back. Harold Pierce closed the office door behind him, his movements still gentle as if he didn't want anyone to hear. The room was small, the yellow light shining on the wall, covered with certificates of excellent service and top-rated restaurant 2023. Elias leaned against the table, his hands in his coat pockets, his eyes calm but deep. "You wanted to see me." Harold smiled, trying to keep his voice polite. "Is there a problem with the food? I want to see the kitchen camera tonight," Elias said, slowly and clearly. Harold's smile faltered. "Sorry, what did you say? Kitchen camera? Tomahawk preparation. I want to see it now." The air was thick. Harold blinked, then forced a smile. "I'm afraid that's not convenient, sir. The cameras are mainly for inventory purposes. Guests are not allowed to see, I know." Elias interrupted, his voice low but firm. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm demanding it." Harold stood still for a moment. He sensed something unusual about the way this guest spoke. It was not his usual tone, not spiteful, not threatening, but not timid either. It was the kind of voice one used to giving orders without raising one's voice. "I really can't, sir. If I want to see, I have to call someone higher up. Just call, the owner, for example." Harold laughed, as if that ended the conversation. Elias looked him straight in the eye. "You are talking to that person." There was no sound, only the ticking of the clock on the wall. Harold took a half step back, his lips dry. "Hi. Sorry. What did you say? I'm Elias Carter, president of Carter and Bay Holdings. Magnolia House is part of our portfolio. And now, I'd like to see the kitchen camera." Harold's face paled. He smiled awkwardly and pulled out a chair. "Yes, of course. I just don't know. Please sit down." Elias did not sit. He crossed his arms. "Turn it on." Harold, with shaken hands, plugged in the USB drive and turned on the monitor. The video appeared a chaotic kitchen, workers running around. But when it came time to serve the tomahawk, the screen skipped, a cut, exactly 2 minutes. "Why is this part missing?" Elias asked. "Maybe the memory is full," Harold stammered. Elias was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice soft and sharp. "You know what's worse than wrongdoing?" Harold trying to hide it. Harold opened his mouth, but Elias pulled out his phone and pressed a few buttons. "Security. Get all the Magnolia House kitchen camera data, starting at 6 p.m. tonight. Save a copy, encrypt it, and send it to New York. Do it now." Harold looked at him, sweating. "What? What are you doing?" "Protect the evidence," Elias said. "As for you, from now on, you are suspended." He slumped into a chair. "Sir." No need to say. I will work with a lawyer." Elias left the room, walking slowly. Even though the music was still playing outside, the atmosphere had changed. As he passed the counter, a few of the employees stopped, their eyes filled with curiosity and concern. Maya stood at the end of the hallway, clutching a tray of glasses. Elias stopped in front of her. "You are Maya Johnson." "Yes, sir." She bowed her head. "Thanks for the paper." She looked up, her voice trembling. You read it." "Yes, and I did the right thing." Maya looked around and whispered, "I will be fired. Not tonight." Elias smiled slightly. "Go home and rest. Come back tomorrow. We need to talk." She nodded, still not understanding what was happening. When he left, she realized her hands were shaking uncontrollably. That night, in a small hotel near the center, Elias sat in front of his laptop. The screen showed a video that had just been downloaded from a server in New York. There was no cut. He turned it up, zoomed in. The image was clear. Chef Coleman leaned over, spitting on a piece of meat. Next to him, the sous chef laughed. The sound was faint, but Coleman's voice was still audible. "Show him where you stand." Elias leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't as angry as one might think. The only feeling was heaviness like a stone in his chest. He saw his mother, saw his childhood, saw the hundreds of times he'd been disrespected. Years had passed. The system still had the same face, just a new suit. He sent the file to his legal team, along with the message, "Prepare for internal investigation. Keep quiet until I speak." When he hung up, the clock read nearly 2 a.m. The city outside was silent, save for the soft patter of rain against the windows. Elias sat still for a long time. He thought of Maya, the young girl with no power, no backing, only simple courage choosing not to be silent. He wondered if he would have had the courage she had at her age. Probably not. When he was younger, he had chosen to keep quiet to save his job. Maya did what most people would not, and he knew that if he did not protect her, all his talk about morality and justice would be meaningless. The next morning, Elias returned to Magnolia House before opening time. Harold was gone. The staff was silent. No one asked any questions. When Maya entered, he was already waiting in her office. She stopped in the doorway. "You wanted to see me? Sit down. I'm sorry about last night. I shouldn't have interfered. You should—" Elias interrupted. "And you saved the reputation of this entire restaurant chain." She was stunned. "I'm just afraid you'll eat that dish." Elias smiled. "You were scared, but you still acted. That is the most precious thing." He pulled a file from his pocket. "As of today, Magnolia House is on hold. The entire kitchen staff will be investigated. As for you, we need to talk about the future." Maya's eyes widened. "Future. You studied law at Howard, right?" She nodded. "Yes, but I dropped out of school. Finish it. I'll pay for it. And when Magnolia reopens, I want you as Director of Ethics and Culture. Me, I'm just a waitress. A waiter who knows how to tell the truth is more valuable than a manager who knows how to hide it." Elias looked at her, his eyes warm. "You saw what I needed to see." Maya was silent, her throat tight. A tear fell and she quickly wiped it away. "Thank you. I don't know what to say. Just keep doing the right thing." Elias stood up. "Leave the rest to me." That afternoon, when the police car stopped in front of Magnolia House, curious passers-by stopped. There was no shouting, just the sight of 3 men in chef's uniforms being led out. Harold was also taken in for questioning. At the door, Elias stood with Maya, watching the whole scene without saying anything. She asked softly, "Do you feel relieved?" "No." Elias replied, "But justice begins here." She looked at him. "I think my mother would be proud if she saw this." "I think so too, my mother." They stood still, a rare moment of peace in the heavy days. Elias turned to her. "You can rest tomorrow. I'll take care of the rest. When you come back, Magnolia will be a different place." She smiled softly. "Yes, sir." Elias looked up at the restaurant sign. The afternoon sun reflected off the shiny silver letters. He knew that, from now on, the name would mean something else, not just a place to eat, but a place where people learned to respect one another. 2 months later, Magnolia House reopened. The sign remained the same, but inside, everything had changed. The walls were repainted in warmer colors. The lighting was softer, no longer coldly elegant. A small sign at the entrance read, "Welcome, whoever you are. We serve respect with every plate." Charlestonians were talking. Some said, "The new owner must be a radical." Others said, "I heard he was a billionaire pretending to be a diner." But no one knew for sure. Only the old staff, those who remained after the investigation, knew that Magnolia now belonged to a different vision. Elias returned to the restaurant on the second evening after reopening. There was no fuss. He walked through the door like a regular customer, but this time everyone recognized him. Maya was at the front desk, wearing her new uniform, a white shirt, a name tag that read Manager Maya Johnson. She smiled and stepped forward. "Welcome, Mr. Carter." Elias looked around. "This place looks different. I want it to be warmer. People who come here should feel like they belong." He nodded, his eyes filled with pride and relief. "You did better than I expected." Maya led him past the rows of tables. There were no corner tables by the stove now. All the tables were similarly lit, with the same tablecloths. In the kitchen, the new staff, a diverse mix of skin tones and ages, worked in unison. There was no more banter, just the sound of knives on cutting boards and the smell of roasting meat. She pulled out his chair. "Do you still want the tomahawk?" Elias laughed. "Yes. This time I believe it will be clean. Clean and fair, sir," Maya said, and left. He watched, the lamplight reflecting off the table, making everything look like a new beginning. Elias felt a strange feeling, relief and sadness. He remembered the first rainy night, the folded piece of paper, the frightened look in the young girl's eyes. From that fear, now came confidence. Sometimes a small piece of paper was enough to change the whole system, while waiting for his food. Elias opened his notebook. On the first page was a sentence he had written years earlier. "Business is about people, not profits." He added a new line, and justice begins in the kitchen. When Maya brought out the food, he looked up. The rich aroma of grilled meat, the butter melting on the surface, was not just the smell of delicious food, but the smell of truth being cleansed. "Let me try." Elias cut off the first piece. He chewed slowly, then smiled. "Very good." Maya smiled, light as the wind. "Thank you. I have an online meeting with my old school tonight. They have accepted my application to return. Good." Elias put down the knife. "Do you remember what I said? Come back here after you finish your studies. I need someone like you to train the new generation." "I remember," she said firmly. "But before I leave, I want to thank you. If you hadn't believed in me, I wouldn't have dared to stand up." Elias looked at her, his eyes softening. "No, Maya. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have seen what I needed to change." Outside, it was raining again in Charleston. Not hard, just enough to make the streetlights shimmer. The restaurant windows were steaming, reflecting the two people, one old, one young, talking at a table near the window. A new employee approached and handed over a small receipt. The bottom line read, "To our founder, thank you for teaching us that dignity can be served." Elias looked at the words and laughed. "I never thought one day I would learn a lesson from my own employees." Maya sat opposite and asked softly, "What did you learn? That no one is too rich to not need to hear the truth, and that sometimes the people who teach us are the ones we least expect." She was silent, but her eyes sparkled. Outside, new guests entered, a young black couple with their little girl. The little girl looked around and exclaimed, "Mommy, this place is beautiful." The mother smiled. "Yes, honey, everyone is welcome here now." The words made Maya choke. Elias looked at her and nodded slightly. Dinner over. He stood up, put on his coat. Before going out the door, he turned back to Maya and said, "I will come back, but not to check, for dinner." She smiled and bowed her head. "Whenever you want. Magnolia is always ready." As he left the door, the wind blew, carrying with it the tinkling of the doorbell. His silhouette disappeared into the rain. Maya stood watching, her heart filled with a rare sense of peace. She knew she had just witnessed a circle come full circle where injustice had begun. Now it had become justice. That night, she went home and opened the door to her mother's room. Ruth was sleeping, her face haggard but peaceful. Maya sat down on the bed, held her mother's hand, and whispered softly, I did it. She smiled softly in her dream, as if she heard it. Outside, the rain was still falling lightly. The next morning, the local papers carried the headline, Magnolia House Reopens on a Mission of Equality in Cuisine. The photo showed Maya standing next to Elias, both smiling. There was no spotlight, no noisy glory, just the eyes of people who knew that the greatest victory is the victory in their hearts. Elias read the article on the plane back to New York. He folded the paper and looked out the window. Below him was the green expanse of Charleston, the city he had left because of his heartache, but now made him proud. He closed his eyes, listened to the steady hum of the engines, and felt at peace for the first time in years. In his coat pocket, he still had the small folded piece of paper the one Maya had written that day. The paper was faded now, but the words were still clear. Don't eat. It's not safe here. Elias smiled slightly. It's safe now. Maya. The plane passed through the white clouds, its lights reflecting off them. On the ground, Magnolia House was still lit, the sign in front of the door reflecting the words, Respect served daily. A year later, spring came early to Charleston. Magnolias bloomed along King Street, filling the warm air with their sweet scent. Magnolia House was now a popular destination not only for locals, but also for visitors from all over. People came here not just for the steak, but also to experience the spirit of the place, a restaurant that bowed its head to justice and stood tall for charity. Maya entered the restaurant earlier than usual this morning. As she walked down the hallway, her hand brushed against the photo hanging in the lobby, Elias Carter shaking her hand on the day of the Magnolia's reopening. They were both smiling, and the light coming through the window made the photo come to life. Beneath the frame was a small inscription that Elias himself had asked to be engraved. Fairness doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be real. Maya has changed a lot. Her curly hair is tied back, her eyes are confident, her voice is deep and clear. She's still in her final year of law school, taking online classes at night. She runs Magnolia during the day and studies at night, tired but light-hearted, because she knows she is living the right life. She turned on her computer and checked the reservations list. One name stopped her Lorraine Carter table for 2, 6 p.m. She smiled. Elias's mother. He'd said he'd bring her for the first time since the restaurant changed. When the clock struck 5:30, Elias appeared, accompanied by a small woman with white hair but still walking straight. Maya stepped out to greet him, bowing. Hello, Mrs. Carter. I'm Maya, the one Mr. Elias told me about. Mrs. Lorraine held her hand, her eyes warm. Are you the girl who wrote that note that year? Yes, sir. You're very brave. When I was young, I also wished someone would be as honest as you. Elias smiled and pulled out a chair for his mother. You kept pestering me until I came here. She chuckled. I want to see the restaurant that kept you up at night for a month. They sat at the table by the window, the same one Elias had sat at the first time. Maya served them. Without even asking, she knew what they wanted: tomahawk and 2007 red wine. While waiting for his food, Elias told his mother about the programs he was implementing, the Fair Plate Fund, which provides scholarships for culinary students of color, the Hospitality with Heart training course, which teaches restaurant staff across the chain how to treat customers with respect, not prejudice. Lorraine listened and nodded. You're doing something I never dreamed of. But you know, I'm not proud because you're a billionaire. I am proud because you still have compassion. Elias was silent, looking at his mother for a long time. His voice was low. If it weren't for Maya, I would have forgotten who I was. Lorraine smiled. And now you two meet, each healing a part of the other. That's how life works. Maya brought out the food. The smell of grilled meat wafted through the air, the sound of the pan sizzling with butter. Elias looked at her, his eyes filled with unspoken gratitude. The dinner was warm and comfortable, without any tension, just steady chatter, soft laughter, and the feeling of a chapter closing. As Lorraine stood up, she looked around the restaurant, white, black, Asian people sitting together, laughing. She said softly, "You see, Elias, this is the America I want to believe in." Elias nodded, his smile a little sad. "Me too." "Mom." After they left, Maya stood looking out the window. The spring rain was falling lightly, casting a soft halo of light on the lamplight. She thought about the journey of the past year from waitress shaking with paper to manager to soon-to-be lawyer. Life is like steak. It has to be cooked to be flavorful. Late at night, Magnolia closed. The staff left. She sat alone, turned on her laptop, and wrote her final paper on justice in the most ordinary places. In it, she wrote, "Justice is not just in the court, but in how we serve others. It is in choosing to speak up when others are silent, choosing to stand up when someone is being put down." I learned that not from a textbook, but from a dinner. As she saved the file, her phone vibrated. A message from Elias Maya. "My mother wants to thank you for making her believe that there are still good people in the world. Next week, I will nominate you for a community scholarship. And remember, don't just study law, live justice." Maya smiled, leaning back in her chair. A tear fell, not from sadness, but from gratitude. The next morning, a group of high school students came to Magnolia on a career tour. She showed them around, showing them the kitchen and the service area, and told the story of that rainy night when a server dared to write a note. A boy asked, "Aren't you afraid of being fired?" Maya smiled. "Yes, but if I don't do it, I will lose something bigger myself." The children clapped. A brown-skinned girl looked at her intently and asked softly, "Can I work here when I grow up?" "When you're old enough, there's always room for you at Magnolia." Maya replied. The tour ended, and she watched the students walk out the door. In the early morning light, she saw the future, a generation that could grow up without fear. In the afternoon, Elias called from New York. "Maya, I have news. The city council wants to award Magnolia a certificate of merit for her community service. You will accept it for me." "You're not coming. I want someone who really deserves it." At the ceremony, Maya stepped onto the podium to applause. Behind her was a sign with the Magnolia House logo. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair tied back, her eyes shining. When the microphone was passed to her, she took a deep breath. "A year ago, I was just a waiter carrying a tray of drinks. I used to be afraid that my voice would not be valuable, but today, I know if I just speak out, the world will listen. No one is too small to do the right thing." The whole hall fell silent and then erupted. In the front row, Elias stood up and was the first to clap. When the ceremony ended, Maya stepped down. He approached and whispered, "From now on, you are not just my employee. You are the spiritual co-founder of Magnolia." She laughed. "I just wrote on a piece of paper, and sometimes a piece of paper can tell the whole story." Elias replied. Outside, the wind carried the scent of the sea. The Charleston sky was a fiery orange. Maya looked up and felt peace in her heart. Life was no longer a series of tiring shifts, but a long journey of meaning. That night, she stopped by her mother's house and opened her mother's door. Ruth was more alert and sat by the window. "Are you home?" "Yes." "Magnolia was honored today." "Mom, I know." She smiled. "The neighbor was watching TV and called to say she saw you. Mom was so proud." "You did it because of me." "No, you did it because you chose not to be silent." She sat down, leaning her head on her mother's shoulder. The two of them sat still, watching the spring rain fall outside the window, somewhere in the city. Elias was also looking out to sea. He thought of his mother, of the past, of those who were considered not good enough. He smiled and said to himself, "Every dish has taste if it is cooked with respect." The city lights reflected on the water, shimmering like thousands of unspoken thanks, and somewhere, in each person's heart, they knew that dinner that year would forever be a legacy. One autumn afternoon, a chilly wind blew through Charleston Square. Magnolia House had become an iconic city destination, featured in food magazines and on television shows. But for Elias and Maya, more important was the meaning the place had spread outside its doors. Maya had just finished a meeting with a group of law students from Howard University who were interning as part of Elias's Fair Plate Fellowship program. She stood in the middle of the room, looking out at the young faces, their voices firm and their eyes bright. "Don't think justice is only found in court," she said, holding a glass of water. "It can start with a meal, a timely word, or a small act like listening. The important thing is that you have the courage not to turn away." A student raised his hand. "Are you ever afraid of failure?" Maya smiled. "I am scared, but fear is no reason to stay still. What is scarier is letting others decide your worth." The room fell silent. In that moment, Maya saw herself a young waitress shakingly holding a folded piece of paper, unsure of what her life would hold. Now, she was the one inspiring others. Meanwhile, in New York, Elias was sitting in a conference room on the 48th floor of Carter and Bay Holdings. Before him was a group of major shareholders, mostly middle-aged white men in suits. They had just finished reviewing the financial report. Magnolia's revenue had increased 46% since the restructuring, but the profits had been shared heavily with social funds and training programs. A shareholder frowned. "Carter, we are not against charity, but this is a company, not a charity." Elias folded his arms, his voice calm. "I understand. But I believe that if a business does not serve people, it will sooner or later collapse." Another person interjected. "You're using emotions to run the business. We are losing money because of those moral programs." Elias looked straight ahead, his eyes sharp and calm. "We don't lose money. We invest in honor. And honor, gentlemen, pays more in the long run than in the short run." The conference room was silent. No one said anything more. Elias gathered his papers and stood up. He knew that changing people's minds was harder than changing numbers, but he also knew that he was no longer alone because out there, Magnolia was proving that fairness could pay off. A week later, Elias flew back to Charleston for One Table, an annual Magnolia event where people sat together regardless of race or class. Hundreds of tables were lined up along Main Street, covered with white tablecloths, the scent of cornbread, grilled butter, and wine mingled in the afternoon air. Maya walked through the crowd, her dress simple, but her eyes shining. She saw Elias standing at the head of the table, talking to a group of reporters. When he saw her, he raised his hand and waved. "Ready for the biggest dinner in Charleston?" he asked. "I don't think anyone has ever seen anything like this." Maya laughed. Elias looked down to the endless table. "When I was a child, I wished I could eat somewhere where no one looked at me differently. Now, I want all the other children to have that feeling." The evening began. Jazz music played, mixed with laughter. Former strangers sat at tables, sharing bread and clinking glasses. Maya was asked to speak on a small stage. She stepped forward and looked at the hundreds of faces before her, some who had suffered injustice, some who had been silent. A year ago, this place was a symbol of division. Today, it is a symbol of connection. We cannot erase the past, but we can rewrite the future by living differently. The applause was thunderous. Elias stood behind him, his eyes filled with tears. He knew that not only had Magnolia changed, but he had too. After the ceremony, Maya sat back as the crowd dispersed. There were glasses of wine and thank you notes left on the table from guests. She picked one up and read, "Thank you for making me believe in kindness again." She smiled and put the paper in her pocket. It was late at night when Elias came and threw his cloak around her shoulders. "You're not going home yet. I just wanted to stay a little longer. This feeling is hard to describe." He sat down beside her, looking out at the river, sparkling with lights. "I understand. I sat there too, years ago, when everything was falling apart. And I realized, sometimes the best things come out of the brokenness." Maya tilted her head and asked softly, "Have you ever regretted coming to Magnolia that night?" Elias smiled. "If it weren't for that night, I wouldn't have met you, and I wouldn't have remembered that justice only has meaning when someone dares to awaken it." They sat still, listening to the wind blowing through the trees. The sound of a piano echoed from a distant stage. What a wonderful world. The next morning, Elias left Charleston. As the plane took off, he looked down and saw people still gathered around Magnolia, where the party hadn't finished. He thought about his mother, about Maya, about the years he had spent looking at the world only through the lens of power. Now he understood true power is the ability to listen. Downstairs, Maya entered the restaurant where the staff was cleaning. She stopped in front of a large new sign on the wall, suggested by the staff, "This house belongs to everyone who believes in respect." She placed her hand on the words and smiled slightly. That night, after Magnolia closed, she opened her phone and wrote a text message to Elias. "I just had an idea. We should open a one-table training course for other restaurants across America. Teach them how to build a culture of respect, not just in service but in how they look at others." In less than a minute, Elias replied, "Do it. Magnolia is just the beginning." Maya closed the phone and looked out at the street. The street lights shone through the window, casting a yellow glow on the wooden table. In that moment, she realized their story wasn't over. It only began, every time someone dared to write a piece of paper or tell the truth. And somewhere in Magnolia's kitchen, the smell of roasting meat wafted through the air again, no longer the smell of contempt, but the smell of restored faith. 2 years after the first one-table dinner, Magnolia House became a national icon. On television, it was talked about not just as a restaurant but as a movement where every chair and every plate told a story of justice and rebirth. Maya stood in the middle of a large auditorium in Washington, D.C., where she had been invited to speak at the Voices of Justice Awards ceremony. Soft lights illuminated her face. In the audience, Elias sat silently, watching her with the pride of a spiritual father. She began to speak, her voice low and slow, each word ringing out clearly. "I do not come from a rich family. I'm just a waitress in a restaurant where people used to distinguish who smiled and who did not. But today, I am not standing here because I wrote a warning note. I am standing here because a man chose not to look away, to listen." The room fell silent. Maya paused, then continued. "Justice does not come from a court. It begins with a heart that listens and hands that dare to act." The applause was thunderous. Elias bowed his head, his heart choking. He never thought that the moment he stepped into Magnolia that rainy night would open a new chapter in his life, not only for him, but for the small world around him. After the ceremony, Maya and Elias walked down Pennsylvania Avenue, the city lights casting a golden glow against the night sky. She held her honorary degree in her hand, but her eyes were distant. "Mr. Carter, I still find it strange," she said softly. "From a small piece of paper, everything has gone this far." Elias smiled, his voice low. "All great things start from small things. A word, an action, a person who dares to believe. I remember the first day I met him. He looked at me as if no one had ever told him the truth, because at that time I had forgotten how to listen with my heart." They both laughed. The wind blew through the trees, and the smell of baked goods wafted from the roadside stall. Elias said slowly, "I have just made a decision. I will resign from the board of directors of Carter & Bay Holdings." Maya was surprised. "You are quitting, huh? I just want to do something more meaningful. I will devote all my time to the One Table Foundation. We will take the program to each state, teaching restaurants how to serve with respect." Maya was silent for a moment, then nodded. "You know, sometimes I think justice needs to be seasoned. Like steak, it's not just the meat, but how you season it with kindness." Elias laughed. "You sound just like my mother." A few months later, they launched their first program in Atlanta. More than 50 restaurateurs came from all over. Maya stood on stage. Elias sat in the front row. She told the Magnolia story again, but this time not with tears but with pride. A middle-aged man raised his hand and asked, "What do you think makes people change long-standing prejudices?" Maya replied, "Not the law, not the pressure, but when they see the real person in others." The whole hall applauded. Elias looked around, feeling as if he were witnessing a fire spreading not fiercely, but steadily. That winter, Charleston had another rare snowfall. Magnolia House was decked out in decorations for its 3rd anniversary reopening. Outside, lines stretched for tables, and in the cold, no one complained. Inside, Maya stood by the window, watching the snowflakes fall on the eaves. Elias entered, holding a small bouquet of flowers. "I heard Magnolia is 3 years old today. I thought you should have some flowers, since you are the spirit of this place." Maya took the flowers, her eyes shining. "Thank you, but I think Magnolia's soul doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everyone who has ever believed that humanity can be better than it was yesterday." Elias nodded. Yes. She looked around and smiled as she saw the staff laughing and joking with the customers. An older white customer was telling a story to the young waitress. There was no distance, just the simple joy of people knowing they were seen. Elias said softly, "I remember my mother saying, 'A restaurant is only as good as the soul.' Now I understand that." Maya replied softly, "And a person is only truly strong when he knows how to bow his head at the right time." They laughed together. Outside, the snow fell harder, the light coming through the windows creating shimmering dots of light. Suddenly, a customer came up. It was the girl who asked Maya years ago, "Can I work here in the future?" Now she was a trainee, wearing the Magnolia uniform. "Miss Maya." Table number 6 asked for a minute. They wanted to take a picture with her. Maya smiled and turned to Elias. "See, now I'm recognized. That's the price of doing the right thing," he said, stepping back to let her walk toward the waiting guests. He stood looking at her in the middle of the brightly lit room, where people were laughing, talking, and sharing a meal like a family. A strange peace filled his heart. He knew the circle had closed not with an end, but with the beginning of a new generation. Late at night, after everyone had left, Maya locked the door and stepped out onto the porch. Elias stood there, staring at the snow. "Aren't you going back to the hotel?" "I just want to look at Magnolia a little longer," he said, "to remember this feeling." "How does it feel?" "The feeling of being redeemed." Maya gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "You have done more than that. You have helped so many people believe that they have worth." He looked at her, his eyes sparkling in the snow. "And you, Maya, have taught me that the truth sometimes comes in a wrinkled envelope." They both laughed. Elias turned and walked slowly down the snow-covered street. Maya watched him until he was out of sight. She knew this might be his last visit to Magnolia as a guest, but his legacy would live on in every employee, every guest, every story told at the dinner table. She went back inside and turned off the lights. Before closing the door, she looked back at the wooden sign outside "Respect Served Daily." She whispered softly, "And kindness every day." The wind blew, snow fell lightly. Inside, the kitchen was still warm, the smell of grilled meat and laughter lingered. And so, the story of the billionaire CEO and the black waitress never really ends. It becomes part of America where wounds are healed with faith and compassion, one meal at a time, one person at a time. In a world obsessed with status, success, and profit, this story reminds us of something deeply human, the power of truth, empathy, and courage. Billionaire CEO Orders Steak, black waitress slips him a note that stops him cold isn't just about a rich man and a waitress. It's about the moment when conscience wakes up, when one person's quiet bravery forces another to see the world differently. Elias Carter had everything: wealth, influence, respect, but he had forgotten what respect truly meant until a young woman named Maya risked everything just to tell him the truth. And maybe that's the real lesson: it doesn't take power to change the world. It takes heart. We all have our Magnolia House moments, times when we can choose silence or courage, indifference or compassion. What we choose defines not just who we are, but what kind of world we build for those who come after us. So, tonight, take a breath. Think about the people around you. And if life ever gives you a moment to speak up, do it, even if your hands shake. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard. Together, let's keep serving respect, justice, and hope every single day.